Welcome to part 2 of genetics and heredity. We're going to continue where we left off in the first presentation. In the first presentation, we learned that Gregor Mendel crossed purebred plants and studied various traits in these pea plants. And no matter what trait he was studying, he found the traits to be predictable in multiple generations of plants. And again, we need to start with some background vocabulary because this unit has a lot of vocabulary. A gene is a sequence of DNA that determines a trait and is passed from parent to offspring. An allele is the different forms of a gene. For example, purple flower or white flower. They're different forms of the same gene. Dominant alleles are alleles whose traits show up in the organism when the allele is present. And a recessive allele is an allele that is hidden whenever the dominant allele is present. So the dominant allele always wins. And a hybrid is an offspring of crosses that has two different alleles for a trait. So how do alleles affect inheritance? Well, genetic information controls the inheritance of traits, and the factors of inheritance are controlled in pairs. The father and mother each contribute one set of genes during fertilization, so that the offspring will have pairs of genes. But one factor in a pair can hide the other. For example, in pea plants, tall overpowers the short. Now we need to talk about another concept, which is genes and alleles. Genes control the inheritance of traits, and alleles are the different forms of a gene. One allele is from the egg, and the other is from the sperm. And an organism's traits are controlled by the alleles it inherits from its parents. Some alleles are dominant, while others are recessive. A dominant allele shows up in the organism whenever the allele is present, and a recessive allele is hidden whenever a dominant allele is present. When we're talking about alleles, we have to know that alleles have different symbols. And scientists use letters to represent alleles. And a dominant allele is symbolized by a capital. And the recessive allele is symbolized by a lowercase version of the same letter. So we're talking about pairs of the same letter. I like this picture because it illustrates how an organism might get a dominant allele, this uppercase B, from one parent and get a lowercase or recessive allele from the other parent, and that dominant allele, that uppercase B, just dominates that recessive allele, and he wins out just by being there. So the dominant allele is always expressed. Let's look at the alleles in Mendel's crosses. A purebred organism has two of the same alleles, so two dominant or two recessive for a trait. And a hybrid organism had two different alleles for a trait, one dominant and one recessive. So if we take a look at this picture here, we see for flower color, they've designated the uppercase A as being the dominant allele for the purple color, and the recessive allele for flower color, which is white, is lowercase a. So the purebred purple flower has 2 uppercase A's, and the purebred white flower has 2 lowercase a's. But the hybrid has 1 uppercase or dominant allele and 1 lowercase or recessive allele. And the color that you see, the trait that you see, is purple. And Mendel's contributions to the study of genetics were pretty significant. So significant that he's called the father of genetics. And he changed scientists' old ideas about heredity. And the value of his discovery sadly wasn't known until after he died.